Coming up on the Mobile Content Creators Show.
So essentially, it works like this. They shoot their Snapchat stuff. We pull it in from our side here at the head office, and we can repackage that for any platform.
So today's topic is, how do you cover a country like India with around 1 billion people when your journalists have all sorts of different devices and you're using Snapchat as your content management system?
Welcome to the Mobile Content Creators Show. If you're a mobile journalist, marketer or creative who makes content on a mobile device or for mobile audiences, you're in the right place. Keeping you up to date with the fast-moving world of mobile, here's your host and mobile video specialist, Mark Egan.
All right, so today I'm joined from Delhi, from the Hindustan Times, by Yusuf Omar, and I'm going to read you a bit of his bio here because you'll understand why I'm interested to speak to him. So, as I said, he's just joined the mobile editor, building the world's biggest mobile journalism team with Snapchat as the CMS. I mean, that in itself is enough for like 3 podcasts. He recently graduated as a Duke Media Fellow, having researched storytelling with an editorial value for Snapchat. If that wasn't enough, winner of Mobile Journalist of the Year 2016 at MojoCon in Dublin. More awards, what the hell. Vodacom Journalist of the Year, Editor's Choice, having worked in South Africa. Named a top 20 global millennial to watch in 2016 by Cliff Central. We're watching, don't worry. And you've mojoed from the Syrian Frontline 2014, Congo, General Assembly in New York, all with an iPhone. So I'm going to ask you a bit more about that, but thanks for joining us first of all. I know you're really busy, but you sound like me. If people say, where are you from? I'm born in London but raised in Hong Kong, Germany and South Africa, so sometimes I just say London. You seem to have quite an interesting background, so what's the 30-second abridged life history then?
Yeah, born in the UK, brought up in Australia, spent the last 5 years getting married and working as a mojo in South Africa. And now I find myself back in India, which is a place my ancestors left 150 years ago. So sort of come full circle.
And, you know, you came to my notice in South Africa. Tell us a bit about what you did there, because I saw you doing stuff with mobile, stuff with 360. So where were you working? What were you doing? And how did you end up on this path?
Cool. So I was working for E-News Channel Africa, ENCA, which is the largest 24-hour broadcaster on the African continent. They broadcast to about 27 African countries. They're all over the place. And I was young and hungry to become a foreign correspondent. And like many young journalists, I wanted to cover the war zones, the natural disasters, to really get out there. And nobody was going to give that to me on a plate. You're too young, inexperienced, and we just rather send the old seasoned guys to do it. But not when you're the cheapest guy in the newsroom. When you can say, you know what, I don't need a cameraman, I don't need a video editor, I don't even need anything, I don't even need a hotel room. Just get me on a flight and I'll make it work. And that's really how I got into the mobile journalism space. It probably started in Congo in 2012. I was actually covering a fashion show, Johannesburg's Fashion Week. You had women with long legs up and down a catwalk, and I got a phone call to say that an ammunition depot has exploded in Congo, in Brazzaville specifically. 6 hours later, we had arrived on a Hercules plane, and I'd gone from woman with long legs to woman with no legs. It was the sharpest contrast I could ever experience. Still wearing the suit, still coming off the catwalk. And I strapped a GoPro to my head. I had a BlackBerry at the time with a god-awful camera, and just started telling the story. And people resonated with it. I called it selfie journalism. It wasn't even mobile journalism. It was selfie because you're holding it out with the palm of your hand. And nothing was scripted, nothing was rehearsed. It was just raw emotions. Man, this is horrific. People have died and maimed all over the place. 2 kilometers in every direction. The ground is just flattened. Of course, remember, why was there a big explosion? What happened? They kept weapons in the middle of civil populations in case there was an uprising. One of these weapons depots caught on fire. So, Mark, as you can imagine, for 3 days, it was a fireworks display, essentially, of tanks, of missiles, of all sorts of lethal weapons. And when you got there, it was just basically a minefield. And I really tried to give somebody, almost when you're shooting with a mobile or with a GoPro strapped to your head, it's point of view. It's shaky, it's messy. But at the time, YouTube was going through that phase where it was shaky and out of focus, and poor audio was almost in fashion. And audiences had never been more forgiving.
But do you think it's more the fact that people, especially with social media, expect a bit more authenticity, and when they see you may have had your suit, obviously, but when they see the reporter in their suit and it's all very, very formal, the language is formal, it just alienates them, and they actually would prefer to have somebody go there almost like their friend and say, this is what I'm seeing, but perhaps with a bit more journalistic nous of trying to be objective and finding the facts, that kind of stuff, but a bit more personal than what we've seen in the past.
Absolutely. The days of a broadcast anchor standing there head and shoulders and saying, we're coming to you live from Syria, I think that's gone behind us. People really want emotion. They want you to look at them in the eyes and explain to them exactly what's happening, and not talk to them, but talk with them. And often use social media and the commentary that's coming to reflect on your answers and engage with them and ask them, what do you want me to be reporting on? And that's become even more apparent with Facebook Live, with Snapchat, where your audience are in a position to dictate what you're going to film. Do I turn left or right at this crossroads? What story should I be telling? So they've become so much a part of the process. It's beautiful.
Now, you went from there and went from strength to strength. You were in Syria. How was that? How did that work?
Yeah, the Syrian civil war. I actually went there with a broadcaster again, and this time we went with a proper ENG camera and the cameraman and all that kind of stuff. And the shooting with a small phone and with small cameras, it just felt more right. It provided more dignity to be able to tell a story with mobile journalism. People had often lost their arms and legs and were maimed and didn't want to have a big flashing camera in their face and massive boom mic over them. I was just sort of holding the camera just here and listening to the story about how you lost your home or you lost your family. It hits home quite hard to me. This week on Facebook, I just posted one of the gentlemen that I interviewed has been killed in a bombing of a hospital. And it's not the first. The gentleman whose house I stayed at has also died. So a series of people surrounding the stories that we told in the documentary that we produced, Working in a War Zone, are no longer with us. As a journalist, I dreamt my entire life of being a foreign correspondent and parachuting into these foreign destinations and telling these stories. And having done it, I wouldn't even want to go 1 centimeter closer to the front line than we were. It's a horrendous place to be. You have absolutely no.
And because of that experience, and because I saw those postings about the sad news of those people you filmed, would you like to go back and do that kind of stuff again, or is it actually this isn't really how I thought it would be? It's actually very traumatic. You can't detach yourself from this, and maybe this isn't for me.
I want to go back into Syria, but on a different context. Syria has lost more journalists than anywhere else in the world over the last 3 years. I would love to go back and provide mobile journalism training. There's such atrocities that are taking place. If we could empower people on the ground to tell their own stories. And again, it goes back to what you said. If we could have civilians, students, people my age that are telling you what it's like to live in Syria right now, I think it would hit home far harder than having a CNN correspondent sitting in Istanbul telling you about the front line in Aleppo. So that's the...
Because, I mean, what lots of viewers don't realise is that often those people are often not anywhere near any
they're
action.
Sitting in Beirut having a cup of coffee.
Exactly. They go to the top floor of a 5-star hotel, get the news from the wires, fed from London or New York or something, and then repeat them and then go back to the pool. Now, I know that can be maybe being a little bit facetious because there are some great war correspondents out there and people who do put themselves in danger. But too often, I think, like you say, it's not the people who are being covered, who are being asked to tell their stories, and that's where mobile is really powerful. Now, you spent that time in South Africa.
Yeah.
And now you're in Delhi. So tell us a little bit about how you finished up in South Africa. I know you started to get into 360. And then, did you get the phone call, or did you actually chase up the opportunity to go to India?
So in South Africa, we set up a Mojo team, basically. We recruited 10 millennials. 12. We recruited 12 millennials in South Africa. And we empowered them with iPhones. And it's been an amazing story where we've tried to keep them as far away from the newsroom as possible. We said, if we hired you from the township, stay in the township. Tell us those stories that we're not getting to. And it's really, they've ended up rapidly teaching us so much. Now I've come to India and scaled that operation up. Where there was 12 Mojos in South Africa, we're trying to create 750 mobile journalists across India. It's a big country, and there's a lot of journalists that we're working with here at the Hindustan Times. Most of them are print journalists. The challenges are immense. Obviously getting to think visually. And of course, we're not going to be rolling out phones. We're going to be using the phones that are in their very pockets. So Mark, this week we did a survey where I listed the 75 most common smartphones that there are here in India. So we could get an idea of what we're working with, what kind of cameras they have, what kind of operating systems have they got. You won't believe they've got more than 75 types of phones here in the newsroom. So
Wow.
if the mobile journalism trainers hate the concept of fragmentation, right? Because we want to standardize
That's right.
things. We want to use the same video editing apps. We want to use the same shooting apps, and we want to be able to troubleshoot. When somebody phones you and says, "Oh, my editing's not working. I want to work out why it is," but now I've got such a great array of phones. It's about coming up with workflows and tools that work across those devices, and I think we're coming quite close to doing that. The idea right now is to use Snapchat as a content creation tool and a CMS tool for everybody in the newsroom. And there's a lot of benefits to that.
And when you say, because I'm just still, the numbers you're talking, it was 750 you want to create across. I mean, how big is the Hindustan Times?
The Hindustan Times puts out 28 newspapers a day. They are in every state in India. It's a gigantic operation. They're the second biggest newspaper in India. And of course, India is in the top 5 media markets in the world. So you're really dealing with a gigantic beast here.
Absolutely
and
enormous. I mean,
it's 120, 130 years old. It's really old and in some ways rigid. And at the other end, it's got the startup kind of culture where they're empowering somebody like a mobile editor like myself. And they're saying, go wild. We want to tell more video stories. How can we go about doing that?
and you are going wild. And, you know, we're moving on to Snapchat here.
Yeah.
And I blame you completely for getting me into Snapchat. So if... you know, I mean, you've seen what I've been posting in the last few days. I've been in Denmark, and yep, every little while I'm posting
addicted.
something,
I know you
and I've got addicted. It's one of those things where I didn't get it at first,
Yeah.
and there's a few things people said. You know, like I interviewed Thomas from the Handball Federation. He said, you know, treat it like it's your own kind of fly on the wall documentary show. You know, telling the story of what you're doing from your perspective.
Yeah, it really is
and
my
also.
story.
I remember you saying about you need to change your mindset because it's a generational thing, because you know your generation is used to oversharing.
Yeah.
So
Toilet selfies.
don't feel like, am I being arrogant by putting this out? Just put it out there. People don't have to watch it if they don't want to, but people are interested in your journey. So it was, you know, like when Twitter first came out, people said, oh, it's just for taking pictures of what you're having for lunch. And then people found uses for it.
Yeah.
It seems like with Snapchat, that's the point we're at now. It's, hey, this is really cool. Yeah, you can put silly faces on, but can you actually, you know, do news on this? Can you do marketing on this? What can you do with it? So you mentioned that you're trying to use Snapchat as a content management system. Yeah. Now, I normally think about content management systems as kind of slightly kind of more advanced and, you know, kind of more databases, the way you might put your website up or store your media. Snapchat seems to me like, you know, something that's quick and disposable in social media. So how would you approach using Snapchat as a content management system?
Okay. So basically, we've got, as I said to you, we've got a vast array of devices in this newsroom, and we have to find a tool that will work across all of them. And for us, Snapchat is that very thing. A lot of the journalists in the survey complained that their priority is to do print, to write, and that doing any sort of video and editing and that sort of thing would distract them from that process. So we need to find the simplest tool possible to create video content. So essentially, it works like this. They shoot their Snapchat stuff. We pull it in from our side here at the head office, and we can repackage that for any platform, for Facebook, for Instagram, for Twitter, whatever it may be. The beauty of it is that nothing's going to ever get stuck in their camera roll. We've seen the vast majority of the people in this newsroom are already shooting video on their phones. But for one reason or another, whether it's data or whether it's not having access or not knowing, for some reason that video content is not getting back to our video teams and it's not getting onto our social platforms. It's just sitting there and they're showing it to their friends and their family. Look what we did today. With Snapchat, as you know, by shooting within the app, you're forced to constantly be feeding this beast. Of course, it's a number of gambles. We're gambling on vertical video working out. And for me, a lot of mojos debate this. Mobile journalists say, should we go landscape? Should we go vertical? And there's a real calling towards 16:9 broadcast style stuff. It's not our decision to make. It's the platforms that are making this decision. If you take Facebook Live, for example, it squares it off for you. So the decision is made. Instagram is also a very square platform. Snapchat is very vertical. And I've heard you say it yourself, Mark. You said short videos generally do for you suit vertical, suit a portrait.
Yeah, because my take on it, and I think like you're right, it's not for me to decide, is that if you're watching, I see it as a lean forward v lean back thing. Like Snapchat,
Yeah.
I'm looking at it and it's short and it's bite sized and whatever. If I were to sit back and watch a long piece of content like a documentary, I think it's just more comfortable because of the way our eyes are positioned to horizontal, so that's more lean back.
Totally.
That's more kind of whereas if it's and like you say, if it's kind of quick stuff, people are getting stuff on their phone, then whatever's most comfortable for them. The one thing I suppose that becomes more difficult is it's harder to repackage vertical video for any horizontal viewing than is the other way around. But the thing that I think is complete genius in what you said is the camera roll thing. So if you haven't actually worked in a situation where you're filming on your phone and trying to get it back and everything, is just that the storage is a problem and these files going backwards and forwards. So the idea of doing this, I think, is genius, and it's the first step to what I think is where we're going to move to everything being in the cloud.
Yeah, exactly.
Of some description, and the device will be completely irrelevant.
We go one step further, Mark. At the moment, Snapchat's not big in India at all, and there's a number of reasons because of that. For that, and data is prohibitively expensive, which is probably one of them. Two things are going to happen. Either Snapchat is going to take off in a massive way in India, and if I was a betting man, I would gamble that it is. And then we have a huge lead, right? We have a team of journalists that understand Snapchat, and we could be one of the first non-Western platforms to be on Discovery and to have a professional account. Or it doesn't take off. And what we do is we have very, very unique video content created on Snapchat with the emojis, with the text, with the drawings that doesn't look like anybody else's video content. So the way I see it, whether the Snapchat takes off or not in the Indian context, we're going to win. And we're going to win. I sound like Donald Trump. We're going to win again. America's going to win again. And on a global scale, Snapchat is winning. I mean, their numbers are just astronomical. 120 million daily users, which is not as much as Facebook. It's perhaps a tenth of Facebook's. But 7 billion video views a day, which is as much, if not more, than Facebook. So the numbers really are on their side. And as you know, in terms of marketers, they love that 15 to 25-year-old age demographic in terms of selling them stuff. And that's what Snapchat offers. And that's just the content creation. We haven't even talked about it as a chat app and the intimacy of being able to have one-to-one communications on the Discovery platform. And it's so powerful. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult. People find Snapchat difficult, but it's because there's so much happening within that one app. You can see that they've started out with the original camera app, and that's what it opens up into, which is cool because it's saying you need to create content. And you pan to the left and you're suddenly in a messaging app, and you pan to the right and you're suddenly in a Discovery platform, and you pan to the right again and you're suddenly in a magazine. And you can see they're just running out of space to put things in. And I just wonder, people complain about the user experience and they say it's really difficult to use, you need a master's degree. I wonder two things. I wonder if they could ever change it, because now we've familiarized ourselves with it. And I also wonder whether that's not part of the experience. You often meet somebody in real life, in a social setting, in a bar or wherever, and you start teaching them stuff about Snapchat. Oh, did you know how to do this? Did you know how to... So it almost has a physical and personal social nature to it, which other platforms don't have.
And I think there's also the element where the reason that so many young people are on it is that it's difficult. So all their parents go onto Facebook, whereas on Snapchat, it's a bit more about them. I think there's a few other elements to it. I mean, you talk about marketing. If you've ever been involved in selling anything, you'll know that one of the drivers to a sale is limited time. So you have to make up your mind, make a decision. And to get attention to your content, if they know they can watch it next week, they'll sort of say, oh, maybe watch it next week. With Snapchat, you've got to keep on top of it because it's gone after, 24 hours, whatever it's gone. So I think there's, the drivers there for people to watch it and to get to that younger audience. And especially news organizations you go into, they're in a flat panic about how do you get younger audiences. If they don't find younger audiences, they're dead, which is presumably what the Hindustan Times are looking to make sure they secure their future. And just in a really boring technical question, how, people snap these, the stuff, all these different accounts. How are you actually keeping on top of that and recording it? How are you actually capturing it?
I mean, there's lots of ways to do image capture, but technically the best way to do it is to get them to save individual snaps before they upload, and then send it to you over Slack, which is a powerful workflow tool similar to WhatsApp, a better place for a newsroom, or something like that. WhatsApp as well. But when you upload it and then you save it, you're actually losing a lot of resolution. So ideally, save individual ones and save them before they mess around with it, before they put the text and the emojis and stuff. Because once that's burnt on, it's difficult to go back from that if you're repurposing it. Just going back to the point, people often have this notion that, oh, Snapchat's great, but it only lasts for 24 hours. You have no reservoir of content, and that scares some people. What organizations often forget is during that 24-hour period, you are infinitely more relevant than any other platform. When you do a Facebook or an Instagram or a Twitter post, it lasts about an hour and a half, and then it's buried in somebody's timeline. And you can look at the engagement numbers. After that period, the engagement drops drastically. Snapchat, every single time I add a new clip to that story, I come right back up to the top of your story, essentially. I'm right in your face all over again. So the shelf life of Snapchat is much longer than other platforms.
And being a bit of a Snapchat guru, if somebody was listening to this and thinking, okay, I like the sound of that, that's interesting. Right, I've got a few minutes. Tell me, how do I storytell on Snapchat? How do I tell a story on this platform? What would you say to them? So
you have to be the most pedantic storyboarder you could possibly be. It's almost like going right back to the very basics 101 of broadcast television. It's knowing exactly what shot you're going to open with, exactly what shot you're going to close with, because it's so linear. You're telling a story and there's no space to move a shot and bring it back and forward and cut things out. You are literally going step, 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 step. So you need to know exactly what's coming. You need to have establishing shots, wide shots, establish your characters. And when you're doing interviews, you've got a 10-second bite, basically. You can do a series of bites, but you've basically got a 10-second window. So you've got to do a pre-interview and say, oh, I like that bite. Can you say that again and say it quickly, because you've got 10 seconds to say it in. And the planning is for a good Snapchat story is like nothing else. And then knowing exactly what elements you're going to put on top of it. Because unlike any other video producing tool, your editing process is taking place immediately after every single shot, which means in a breaking news situation, you need to be quick, and it should be perhaps limited to just text or simple things. And in a featurey space, you're actually becoming an artist, and you need to be thinking like a graphic designer and using space and creating white spaces to put things onto. It is immensely labor intensive in the shooting process, much more than any other app, but there's no post-production. Once it's done, it's a complete clip, and you can send it out. And what do you consider, like if people are making a traditional video, they'll say this is a minute, this is a minute and a half, this is whatever. With Snapchat, do you kind of think durations, number of snaps? How do you approach it? So it depends where they're digesting the content. If they're digesting it on Snapchat, I would go as far as to say you can have an infinite amount of content, because they have got the ability to control the speed at which they watch it. If you're not familiar with Snapchat, every time you're watching a video, you can just click the screen while you're watching it, and it will skip to the next element of the video, which is really intuitive, because when I'm watching YouTube, I often find myself scrolling along the video to get to interesting bits. So they've taken that process out. It's about trying to create thumb-stopping content, stuff that's going to stop somebody from skipping on to the next one. But if you're going to re-export it to Facebook or to Twitter or to Instagram, it's the same policies that you're maneuvering everywhere else. And I think organizations like Newswhip have done a study where they've taken AJ Plus, Daily Mail, and they've looked at what's the average length of videos in general that do well on distributed platform environments. And they're generally a minute and under. So I'd stick to that rule when you're exporting it. But within Snapchat, if it's engaging, if it's thrilling, if it's entertaining, go for all you want. And you'll know how you're doing, because so a lot of people are worried about analytics when it comes to Snapchat, but you actually have a lot of data coming in there. You can see exactly how many people are watching each clip, and you can see pretty much when they're dropping off. You can also use the screen grabbing function. You can create polls. If you want me to do this, screen grab the screen now. And it's almost a call to action. And your views are unlike Facebook or Twitter, where you count retweets. You can count each view on each clip and add those up to get a total number of impressions. Right, and I saw one story you went out on recently where you were going to try and film a demo by African workers, I think, in Delhi, and you got there and they were just packing up. But what I thought was interesting is, for years and years and years, even before this technology, one of the things that bugged me is that journalists always seem to hide the process of telling the story, whereas I think part of the story is, you not being allowed to film there, or this is what's happening, rather than you just make it like you're making a movie. You want to see the making of as well. The backstory. And do you, when you're telling a story, maybe you can use examples of some stuff you've done. Do you include your whole process, or is it mix and match? Do you sometimes just tell the story in a slightly traditional way, but just on a new platform? I think you're absolutely right. Backstories is really where Snapchat will come into its element, to bring people into the process of creating great video content, or any digital content for that matter. And people are thrilled to know this kind of stuff. I mean, just if you look at the green screen behind myself or you, the amount of people that would just want to know how we chroma key and what functions it has is powerful. Media is essentially becoming more accessible, and people want to get into that space. Essentially, we are getting more content for our buck with Snapchat. If you're producing a story, 1 minute 30 for television, but you can produce Snapchat content all around it. And the best utilization for traditional platforms is to drive people back to their stories, even if it's a newspaper, to be part of the process of the typing, of the going out, of the phone calls. And so that by the end of the day, somebody's followed the whole story. They're certainly going to go and buy that newspaper or listen to your radio broadcast to see how the finished product came out.
That may answer one of the questions I had, which is, if you're a newspaper, how do you monetize it? Because it's on somebody else's platform, and if they're enjoying your content on Snapchat, that's great, live it up. But you've got to pay the workers and keep the lights on. So is it the fact that it attracts people to your content and then you feed them through to other channels where perhaps you can advertise to them?
So I think for the personal brands on Snapchat, if you are going to go down that path, it's going to be content marketing, product placements and that. For news organizations, I see it entirely as brand building to, as you say, push them and disseminate them towards other platforms. But in terms of if a newspaper or news organization gets onto this discovery, which is essentially a Snapchat section where it's like a magazine, you don't have to play by the Snapchat rules. You can produce your content on a desktop and it's a whole different experience. It's essentially a monopolization of professionalism. You can create really, really classy looking stuff. That's really easy to monetize and it has proven to be really successful. And if you're not successful on that, they kick you off. They've got a limited 16 or so discovery platforms. So I think that's where the monetization comes into its element on Snapchat in the discovery section. But anything else than that, it's really about branding. It's really about pushing people back to existing platforms.
And just finally on Snapchat, where in a year's time you've done everything that you hoped would happen, what does the Hindustan Times Snapchat offering, what does it look like? What effect does it have? What's the end goal?
The end goal is to tell more stories, to have more eyes on the ground, telling more stories than ever before. I think critically, we're going to have to move beyond even 750 journalists to the greater Indian public of 1.2, 1.3 billion people at large and work out how to access their snaps and bring them into our storytelling process. And that's really difficult at the moment. The critical flaw of Snapchat for media houses is the lack of a discovery tool, the lack of an ecosystem. It's very difficult if there's a breaking news story happening to find out whose Snapchat accounts it's on. There's no search capacity. Nobody's sharing it or anything like that. It's going to be about coming up with very clever ways of crowdsourcing Snapchats. But when we do that, we can be certain that crowdsourcing on Snapchat is more authentic than any other platform. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, we know that they shot it within the app. Unlike Facebook, where they could upload a video and say this was taken at this time and we're not sure if it was. Number two, they can swivel across and put geotags on it. So it says Delhi, so you know relatively well that the metadata is true, that it's within Delhi. They can even put timestamps on it. These are all fact-checking. It's tech-in-check mechanisms that don't exist within other platforms. So I really believe the future of Snapchat is going to be really, really, really accurate, fact-checked content that we can crowdsource.
Okay, now moving on to some other platforms and things like, are you thinking of using things like perhaps WhatsApp for audio or and things like Facebook Live? Where does that fit into the whole strategy?
So WhatsApp is something that we're trying to get our heads around because when we did the survey last week, we surveyed the 750 journalists at the Hindustan Times. More than YouTube, more than Facebook, everybody is using WhatsApp, not just to communicate, but to get their news. But WhatsApp is almost a closed system. Their APIs are not open, so we can't really build bots for them. We can't really create groups that are more than 250 people. You can do a newsletter of sort, but we're banging our head against the wall trying to come up with effective ways to tell news on messaging systems like WhatsApp. But what we are doing is on the Facebook Messenger front, we're coming up with a Facebook bot, an automated messaging system. If you've ever played with Quartz, Quartz is a New York-based news agency who really revolutionized the idea of a news app. They came up with an app where you could essentially have a conversation. It said, hey, Donald Trump said this, and you could say, yes, I'm interesting, or no, I'm not. And that's a process in theory of machine learning where it eventually works out what you like and what you don't. The evolution of that is to integrate that into your existing platforms like Facebook Messenger and be able to have more play where somebody can ask a specific question of what's happening in Delhi politics today, and we can give you an answer that feels like a human being, but it's actually curated artificial intelligence. And taking that a step further, they could ask very personal questions and we could get a reporter to respond. So we're really excited about messenger apps playing a big part. But also around the world, what's everyone talking about? They're all talking about virtual reality. And in developing nations, that's proving incredibly difficult because data is so prohibitively expensive. So we're really trying to come up with low-cost ways to deliver 360-degree videos. And on that front, we're considering the idea of pairing audio and 360 photos on top of each other. Doing a 360 photo where you can whiz around and putting an audio track below it may be a more cost-effective way to deliver that sort of experience to the masses here in India.
Yeah, that's sort of like Bubbly, those kind of
Bubbly was a really cool idea.
So you've been in Delhi for a little while now, and you worked in South Africa. So you work in these big, the BRICS countries, the big emerging markets, and they're huge numbers, and they're kind of, the Hindustan Times is old, but perhaps in some ways kind of the most interesting places because of sometimes the lack of baggage, and you're getting new people coming online. What's the thing that you've seen in India that's most excited you, that you arrived there and you thought, right, this is the place to be to do the kind of job I do?
I think purely, it sounds so simple, but the amount of eyeballs, it's colossal. The amount of, when you put out a tweet, the amount of people that retweet you here compared to any developed country is just ridiculous. And the amount of people that are watching your Facebook lives when you go live, or any content that you put out, there's just such an enormous audience. It's almost the same logic that if you set up a juice shop here on the street, you're going to get more foot traffic than you are going to get in a European city, because there's just more people on the street. So it's a huge amount of people that are looking at every single thing you do and taking it all in. That's perhaps been the biggest. And I'm amazed by how quickly they will be able to potentially surpass your Western newsrooms, because they're skipping entire technological generations. The vast majority of my colleagues here didn't experience dial-up internet. They went straight to broadband. Or they didn't experience sort of a really, really 2G experience of internet on their phone. They went straight to 4G. So they're skipping entire technological generations, and that saves costs, and it has huge benefits. And the price of devices are incredibly low. You can get a smartphone here for $25, $30. The barrier of entry is incredible. You can get a car here for about $2,000, a Tata Nano, brand new. So the access that people have to consumer products is becoming cheaper and cheaper. People are becoming more literate and more affluent, so they're getting more involved in video. And at the same time, it's one of the only markets in the entire world where newspaper growth is still on the up. And that is a problem for somebody like me, who's trying to push this digital notion. And when you're not in this critical do or die stance that many people are in the UK or in the US, there's a bit of complacency. I think the death of print and newspapers is maybe 5 years behind the rest of the world here.
And do you find that difficult in the sense that you walk into the newsroom, you say, hey, well, you need to do this new stuff, and they're like, why? Whereas if you're in Europe or America, it's like, yep, okay, we'll try anything at this point. How are colleagues responding to it?
I think they've come up with really clever ways to bridge traditional media and new media. If you look at Times of India, which is our competitor, the largest newspaper in India, they've come up with an app that essentially you can, it's called Times Alive. You can scroll over a print story, and it picks that photo and it pops up into a full video. So that is an amazing integration of digital technology and hard print, almost like a QR code, basically. I think that's cool. The appreciation that digital is relevant, but still talking to your audience that are paying the bills and keeping these lights on, which is the newspapers.
Yeah, and the other trend from what you're saying, which I strongly believe in, is that we're going to get more and more and more to the point where the individual journalist, and even in a business, it might be the individual sort of member of staff, whatever, are going to be as important to pulling people into the brand as whereas in the past, if you want anybody to listen to you, you had to work for the BBC or whatever. Now, individual reporters are going to be expected to use all the tools to build their own following and bring that to the table. And, it's already happening. If you go for a job, it's like, well, how many followers have you got?
What are you bringing
what
to the
platforms
table?
are you
Exactly.
on? So I think part of what you're doing as well is going down that road as well, empowering people. And just finally, if people want to learn a bit more about what you're doing, maybe see some of the content, what sort of things should they be looking at? Where should they be finding you?
I think on a day-to-day basis, it's definitely Snapchat. Yusuf Omar SA, YUSUF OMAR SA. Other than that, Facebook. I'm thoroughly a platform agnostic dude. I don't believe in homepages. I don't have a yusufomar.com. I don't believe in that notion. I think content should live on timelines, and that's where I'm going to live. I think that's the place to be, and people are rapidly taking an appreciation for that. Even in newsrooms like this that are still rather traditional, they're moving away from .com strategies. They're not using Facebook and Twitter to host their to push people towards their other content, but to be a host of content, and that's exciting for me. But at the same time, some of the conversations that we're having here are conversations that I had back in 2010 in other newsrooms. Should we be scooping ourselves on Twitter? And I'm like, of course we should. If we don't, somebody else is going to do it. But that's still such a discussion that's happening in news places like this. And that's one of the things that we've got to navigate through. But I look forward to you, Mark, coming to visit me in Delhi. I think your skill set would be very valuable. But you'll notice, like I have, that every single person in this newsroom is infinitely more educated than myself or you. To make it to the Hindustan Times in a country like this with so many smart people, a master's is the very least. One master's. Everyone's got one master's. All we bring to the table is, I suppose, a Western education and freedom of I don't know, having pushed the boundaries of storytelling, is a sense of creativity, I suppose. A lot of people here have had people say no to them a lot. No, we can't do Facebook Lives while we're moving around the office. Well, why not? Let's try that. I'm trying desperately hard to break a lot of the television habits that they're trying to implement onto digital. They're still doing Facebook Lives like an anchor sitting there. This is the news. And that's what's needed here in India right now is people to come in and break the rules and say, no, you don't have to do it. You can do whatever you want. Let's just see what happens. And everyone's learning themselves. Yesterday, I set somebody up with we did a shoot on their phone. It was a 4-year-old Nexus phone. And then I just got them WeVideo, which is a app that works across platforms. I said, I'll be back in 2 minutes. I've got a meeting. And I ended up coming back 20 minutes later by accident. And I came back and they'd finished their edit. So the idea that the Mojo mobile journalism trainer has to be very hands-on is not true. If you've got an intuitive young crowd, they'll work it out themselves. You've just got to enable them with the ideas.
Yeah, and also, I mean, WeVideo is fantastic because it's again very cloud-based. But I think also the other thing is people can sometimes get bamboozled by the technology. And the reason I'm getting into Snapchat now is because every time I see a new platform, I think, well, I have to figure this out because if that's what the audience are on. But the next level is how do you tell a story on it? Because again, you've got lots of people who are technically very good across all platforms, all types of content, but they forget that the important thing is the story.
Totally.
And often, especially with mobile, people are complaining about, bit rates and all sorts of stuff like that. And it's at the end of the day, what are you trying to do? Which is to connect with your audience and give them something that engages them, touches them, makes them feel something. And that is why you throw whichever tools you have at that and not just do things because that's how it was done 5-10 years ago. So
I'm also struggling with the decision-making process. We go out to a story where African nationals are being attacked here in India, for example. Do you take that as a Facebook Live? And is that engaging and is there a sense of suspense and are people going to be on that? Do you take it as a Snapchat story? Do you do it as a conventional 1 minute 30 package shot landscape? And some people say that we should be using analytics to base those decisions. We should be looking at what's done well in the past. But sometimes I think you got to go with your gut and what feels right for a particular story. And that decision has to be left with the storyteller in the field at the time. So while I've talked about Snapchat at great lengths, we're empowering the guys with a host of tools. We're teaching them to shoot landscape and portrait. We're teaching them to do 1 minute 30 stories and do a Snapchat piece. And I think the decision should be left with them in the field as to what they're good at and what feels right for that particular story.
Okay, well, I'm fascinated by what you're doing and also inspired. And I'd love to come to India again sometime. If for nothing else, just because you keep posting pictures of food. And I'm supposed to be on a diet at the moment and it's not helping. But best of luck with what you're doing there. It's really exciting. And I'm sure lots of other people can learn a lot from your approach and what you're doing. So thank you very much. And I hope to see you again in person very soon.
Can't wait to see you in Delhi. Bye-bye.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to subscribe. And we'd love it if you would leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. To get in touch with Mark, go to www.purplebridgemedia.com or tweet him at Mark Egan Video.